And what we're finding in the Edwards now are generally low concentrations of man-made contaminants. Generally, near the more vulnerable portions of the aquifer. Right here, we're living over the Edwards Aquifer. It's 500 to maybe 1,000 feet down. So that even though San Antonio's been here for hundreds of years, it's only relatively recently that it's grown out over the more vulnerable portions of the aquifer. And so that's where we're beginning to find these man-made contaminants. Almost all cases, real low concentrations of things like pesticides and chlorinated solvents. But because they're man-made, we know that somehow we put them there. So that's telling us that we need to be careful with what we do. And a lot of it's a result of this non-point source, non-point sources. So I think that the way to deal with protecting the Edwards is to try to make sure that we don't do things in the future that will increase the amount of contamination that we're introducing into it. And I believe that those are basically two things. One is we have to limit the intensity of urbanization, primarily by limiting impervious cover. Impervious cover is things like streets, parking lots, rooftops, really any man-made feature that prevents water from soaking into the ground like it would under natural conditions. It turns out that there's a real strong relationship between the amount of impervious cover in an area and the concentration of contaminants in surface water. Now, that's surface water, but on the recharge zone, that surface water goes into the aquifer and becomes part of our drinking water supply. After you get impervious cover more than about 10 to 15% in an area, surface water contaminants increase rapidly, and on the recharge zone, that becomes, as I said earlier, that goes into the aquifer. So we need to limit impervious cover to 10 to 15%. That's one thing we need to do. Another thing we need to do is regulate how people use hazardous materials over these vulnerable portions of the aquifer. Right now, we have no limits on, if somebody wants to build a Lowe's or a Home Depot and store hundreds of thousands of gallons of paints, pesticides, solvents, and whatever else they got, we don't regulate that. Go ahead. We don't tell them what they can put there or what kind of precautions they have to take. And I think that that's what we need to do. And that's what, as a member of the board of the Edwards Aquifer Authority, I've been trying to do for 3 years since I've been on the board.